I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another of my monthly webinars. Here's how it works. I will speak for probably 50 to 60 minutes, give you a short presentation on this topic, and then we'll shut off the recording and open it up for some dialogue, questions, answers, reflections, and hopefully you can stay around for the full 90 minutes, but I know many people, we got full lives, and if you have to jump off at any time, but certainly after an hour, feel free to do that. These recordings will be available for you on my YouTube station, and you'll get a copy of the link to have the recording to pass. Feel free to pass it around. I'm on my own this morning. Kristen, who those of you who've been around for a while know that Kristen generally introduces me. She is at this moment in Disneyland with her family, enjoying herself. So we will excuse her for today. I tried to convince her to call in from Disneyland and inspire us while she was standing in line for a ride, but she chose otherwise, which I'm glad she did. Anyway, thanks, folks, for joining us. Folks, I want to take a moment and start with just to let you know, I want to be very transparent here that we're here in these monthly webinars to introduce you to our 4-day Leadership Academy. Our in-person one is filling up. We're just about full. We've got almost 40 registrants at this point, and we're going to shut it off at 50. These are filling. This one's filling up, but we do have lots of room in the virtual one. So if you want to join us either virtually or in person, there are seats available for both of those. If you feel inclined that you want to go deeper with this material, if it feels like it calls to you, and you want to learn more and go more deeply into it, there will be an opportunity to sign up. And Marg Barr, my Vice President of Client Care, is on the call today, and she'll be helping me read the chat room. I'm going to ask you, we're going to try to create a little bit of a dialogue today, so she'll be on here, but she'll also post for you the link so that you can know where to find more information on that. It's in partnership with the University of Calgary. I want to stop for a minute and just pause. There's a lot of darkness in the world right now, and I refer here to a Tolkien quote, "The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places, but still there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it still grows perhaps the greater." So folks, this is my way, my small way of making a contribution in the world to bring a little light to the darkness that's around us. But I'm going to tell you, if you're on this call, what we would call this is any challenges that might be confronting any of you, we would call those luxury problems. I'm assuming none of you are having your houses blown up and losing your family in war. But if you are, most of us are dealing today with luxury problems. So let's take a moment and realize that we can be a part of the solution and a little part of the love. It's as much as I can say, and feel inadequate knowing quite what to say, but I do want to give some recognition to the people around this planet who are currently living in some pain. So we're going to go on a little journey here today. And like all my presentations, I hope that this isn't just a bunch of content, but that actually is a reflective journey for you. And I always say it's okay not to come with me on this journey. I'm inviting you to come along, but we're all at different life cycles, different stages in our life, different perspectives on what we're dealing with in our organizations and in our families. But I hope there will be something here for all of you. So just give you a little agenda. I'm going to spend the first part reflections on honesty and truth telling in organizations. What does honesty really mean? Just slow the whole process down. We all talk about, it's important to tell the truth. It's important to be honest. What does that actually mean? So I'm going to give you some of my thoughts on it, and then hopefully some of you will stay after and we can have some collective thoughts on what you mean. I'm not the smartest person on this call right now. I'm just one voice of many here. Then I want to talk about strategies for inspiring honesty around you. Particularly, that will be for those of you who are in a position of authority, have a positional authority. And, honestly, you can relate this to your workplace, your team, your organization. If you're on a board, you can relate it to your family. I think the same principles apply. And then we're going to talk about, to end it, we're going to talk about strategies for bolstering courage. It's going to take courage. It's a shared ownership here. It's a shared responsibility where positional leaders need to create a place where people can be honest and forthright and upfront, but also we all probably need to be a little more courageous. It takes courage to be honest. And so depending on where you're at, we're going to talk about strategies for both. Okay. All right. Let's just give you some reflections on honesty. First of all, I've done a little bit of thinking about this to prepare for this. There's two kinds of honesty. And again, I don't have the truth on this. I'm just giving you a philosophy on this. And I would love your input, either in the chat room. You're welcome to give your reactions in the chat room. I mean, we've muted everybody just for the sake of the benefit for all of us, so that we don't get any noise in the background. But I don't mean to mute you in terms of having a voice here. So there will be an opportunity, certainly through the chat room or in the dialogue afterwards. I would love you to have a voice and add to my learning as we go through this. All right, so ethical honesty that's not stealing, lying, padding expense accounts, or committing fraud. I think we're all pretty clear that would be what we would call ethical honesty. But there's another level of honesty, and that's what I would call psychological honesty, and that's making the shift from being polite to being genuine. I always say the opposite of engagement, folks, is not disengagement. The opposite of engagement is polite. Now, I mean, many of us, or probably most of us on this call, although we've got a number of international callers, but folks calling in from the States, but we are Canadian for the most part on this call, and we're taught to be polite. And I guess there's nothing wrong with polite, but it's one of those things that's probably necessary in organizations, but it's far from sufficient. What we're trying to do, my commitment in my work, is to create workplaces and families and systems where people can be who they are, where people can be genuine. And how do we create that space? It's a space. So why does honesty matter? I think we can all say we'd like to be honest, but why is it important? And by the way, if we go back to those two kinds of honesty, I would suggest that psychological honesty is just as important, and maybe even more important. Well, I won't say more important, but let's not all be ethical at the expense of our psychological honesty. I hope that all of us on this call are ethical, but we also, I'm going to argue that psychological honesty is perhaps just as important. All right. Why does it matter? So I'm just stopping to ask a question. What is, or was it like to work in an organization that didn't feel safe to be honest, where you chose to be polite, where you chose to just play the party line over being genuine? What was your level of trust, engagement, fulfillment, and productivity? And I'd actually like you to stop and just jot it down in the chat room, some of your initial thoughts. What was it like to be in an organization where you couldn't be psychologically honest? And there's a high degree of probability when people can't be psychologically honest, there's often in those organizations ethical challenges. As we say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Crime doesn't happen in the sunlight. Crime happens in the darkness. Bacteria grows in the darkness. So just get a few words down. What was it like for you, or what's it currently like to be in an organization where you chose to be polite, where you just weren't free or didn't feel safe to be honest? And Mark, I'm just going to have you kind of browse the chat room, and if you could chime in here with some of your what are some people saying about what's it like in their organization when they can't be honest? Mark?
Well, clearly people have experienced this because we're getting lots of comments. So no trust, no engagement, no fulfillment, and it burnt me out. Walking on eggshells, no innovation happened. Watching your back at all times, withdrawing, not sharing, not authentic. Very draining and demotivating, and I kept looking for a new place to work. No creativity, I was stifled. Discrimination, disconnected, no trust, productivity suffers, no teamwork. unproductive, soul crushing.
Wow.
Um, I felt it wasn't safe. I lost myself, oppressive. It silenced me. I decided not to share my opinions because it was evident they weren't valued. No voice. Yeah, lots of,
Wow.
lots
That's
of,
less than 60 seconds. People have had some experience with this. It's painful. It's painful. Thank you, Mark, for capturing those. And thank you all for contributing to that. This is painful. This is real life stuff. And how many of us want to work in these places? So thank you. Feel free to put your answers there. So how often have you found yourself at work when you discover that there's some very vital, valuable part of yourself that didn't travel there with you? What happens to your soul when your special gifts cannot seem to find their place in what you're doing? And how often have you ever been in an organization when you found that there's far more talent, brain power, wisdom, resourcefulness than the job required or even allowed? I love the notion of innovation and creativity and how that gets stifled. Folks, these questions and all of the comments that Marg just read there have to do with people not feeling safe. And so this is a big issue. This is a big issue. Actually, I was kind of overwhelmed that I didn't quite know how to respond. There was more comments than I expected there to be. So immediate, it's just that rush. So thank you. To win in the marketplace, you have to first win in the workplace. And to win in the workplace, you have to first win in the personal place. It's tough. And I'm going to start from this notion. It is tough to be honest with people in authority. It's tough to put truth to power. And as much as we all would like to say that when you get promoted, you don't get more power, you get more accountability, as much as I'd love to say that, it is still hard for all of us, myself included. Now, I've been the CEO of my company now for more than 40 years. People say, well, it must be easy for you to be honest. I'll tell you who's in authority in my life are my clients. I'm here to please my clients. I'm here to bring value to my clients. And when my clients want something, it's not easy to be upfront. It's not easy to have these conversations. It's not easy to create these safe places where people can be honest. And I'll tell you, we don't get a lot of training in this. We don't get a lot of skill development as we're raised. So part of it is, when did you ever not feel safe around authority figures in your life? This stuff goes way back. This is far bigger than the work issue. When did you ever feel like you couldn't be honest with your parents? When could you not be truthful with extended family or religious leaders or teachers or coaches or others in your life that were put in a position of authority? See, how many of you, you don't need to raise your hand on this, but how many of you have ever been bored in a class? But how many of us in all of our years of education ever raised our hand and said, excuse me, but I'm bored? You see, what happens is that we go underground because it's not safe. We're not taught how to be direct with people in authority. Because for one reason, I think we have insecure teachers. I remember a grade 1 teacher, and I remember being able in that classroom, somebody raised their hand and said, Miss Rieger, I'm bored. And the teacher, you see, if you take it personally, you just send the kid to the office. We get punished for being bored. And so what happens is that we go underground and we create excitement. We create a lack of boredom. We complain about it at the recess. We throw spitballs. We make the classroom excited. All of these are indirect ways of expressing that we're bored. Now, what this teacher did was looked at this child. I still remember this. Looked at this child and said, you have a problem. What can I do to help you solve your problem of boredom? And they created a dialogue. That was the kind of teacher that this teacher was. But that's a rarity. And this is, so few of us have had this experience of being able to be direct and tell the truth. So what happens is then we end up in the workplace and we have a meeting and stuff comes up and you don't speak the truth. And so what happens is we've all had this experience of having the meeting after the meeting in the hallway, just like we did in elementary school. Well, I can't be direct with my teacher because I'll get sent to the principal's office. I'm going to get punished for being direct. So I'm going to learn how to be indirect. It's not safe to be direct. Okay. So this is early patternings that we develop. Now, I want to say there's a very big difference between saying I'm bored and you're boring. And this is another issue that we need to come to understand, is the difference between an opinion and truth. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but if we could learn to say, now, if you say to a teacher, you are boring, that's disrespectful and that's an opinion. That's not truth. That's just an opinion. If you say I'm bored, that's truth. And we are just not conditioned or trained or taught how to deal with people directly. Now, many of you who have been through my presentations before know I took a course about 3 years ago, well, but 4 years ago now, from a cellular biologist, and I learned it was a cellular biologist who taught us about leadership. And basically, cells have two purposes. They need to protect and they need to grow. They can't do both at the same time, but cells need both to function and survive. And if cells are in a protective mode, they are not going to grow. That was just illustrated in the chat room. You are not going to grow and express yourself if you're in a protective place. This is not just psychological, it's biological. The cells will not allow you to do that, will allow your brain to function if you're in a protective mode. At the same time, there's times that you need to protect yourself. But what's really critical is to understand when you need to protect and when you need to grow. The ultimate truth is looking into a baby's eyes. This is truly where authenticity, and I just want to give a little bit of a cornerstone here, a background philosophy here about before we get into the strategies. If you look into a baby's eyes, you see the essence of authenticity, beauty, truth, and love. And the ultimate truth is bringing that essence to who you are. But what we do is that we hide, because the essence of ourself is somehow interpreted as not being safe. So we downplay or cover up certain aspects of yourself out of fear that being different or associating with someone different will prevent you from feeling safe. So we cross off these aspects, our needs, our heart, our beauty, our truth, our passion, our creativity, our sexual orientation, our ethnic heritage, our gender, our dreams. These are just examples of what we cross off in order to feel safe. And in reality, that's where our genius is what we cross off. And so a big part of my work is allowing that truth to come into the world courageously. You see that we have two fundamental needs in our upbringing. We have a need for attachment. We have a need to attach to people who are significant in our life. And we have a need to be authentic, to have that truth and beauty and love come fully out into the world, into our lives. But I'm going to tell you, if you're at risk, attachment will always trump authenticity. We will cross off our authentic self. We will compromise our authentic self always as a child in order to feel attached. If you don't feel connected to your peer group, you will compromise who you are in order to try to feel attached, because that is what your security and your survival, it depends on that. And so in order to feel attached, we compromise ourselves. The greatest truth in our life is to be who you are. It's that simple and it's that complex. This is my work, is to bring that essence of your truth fully forward. Let's understand what that is. Howard Thurman, who was a great theologian who influenced Martin Luther King's work a great deal in the 60s and 50s, said, don't ask what the world needs. And this is what I've said to my kids. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs is for you to come alive. Unfortunately, I've said this to my kids. The greatest gift you can give your organization, your relationships, any system that you work in or live in, the greatest gift is your own development and your own passion. That's what the world needs, but we have been taught and reinforced that it's not safe to do that, because to do that means you're going to have to give up love. You're going to have to give up attachment. And so we compromise our fundamental need for authenticity in order to fit in. And all I'm asking you to do is observe that in your own workplace, in your own life. So let's really look at what is truth in the context of relationships. Here are at least some of the attributes that I've come up with. Number one, it's unarguable. It requires you can't argue with truth. If you say I'm bored, you can't, I mean, you can try to argue with that, but I'm hurting. That's unarguable. It's truth. It's who you are in this moment. It requires a degree of vulnerability and courage. There's personal responsibility is always implied. So this is truth telling is not about dumping. It's not about absolving ourselves from our side of the street. It's about saying, this is where I'm at, and there's a respect that's required on the other side. There's an intent to grow ourselves and the relationship. It's respectful, and it leads to the benefit of the greater good. These are my attributes to truth. This is not about making anybody wrong, and it's not discounting anyone. So what I've done here is that I've drawn this little chart that shows the difference between truth and opinions. And don't mistaken opinions. We come up with opinions as a way of coping with by protecting ourselves against the truth, because opinions don't require so much vulnerability. I'm bored versus you're boring. I'm feeling this way. Your clothes are ugly. I have an idea. Your work sucks. I'm offended. I need help. I'm having a difficult time here. I'd like to give you some feedback. I made a mistake. These are examples of unarguable truth. Now, I'm going to give you an example in my own work life, in our own organization. Just in the last week, we have been spending the last 2 to 3 months in a process of hiring. And we hire really slowly around here. There's a very critical position that we're hiring for, so we're taking our time. What we have discovered is that our best candidate is currently, this is a person who's going to take care of our clients, and also in a sales and marketing role, is going to take care of our clients, is going to be doing the contracts, and is also going to be doing some proactive sales work in our organization. Our best candidate is a woman who is currently looking after her mother who has dementia. And she's is loyal and is just taking care of her mother. And so she doesn't have a lot of time at this moment during times to do this work. Now, last week, her mother, actually, she's still in the hospital, had a severe infection and almost died. And this woman was at the hospital 24/7, helping and supporting the hospital take care of her mother. It's a very strong value that she has, part of her culture and part of her own individual values. And in the midst of this crisis, she had functioned on very little sleep. And I'm having a conversation with her on how she's doing, and I'm trying to be supportive. And I got afraid. But instead of telling the truth about the fear and respecting the fact that this is probably not the time for me to raise this, because she's tired, she's in this place that she's taking care of her mother, she's exhausted at this moment, what I said is, maybe we should take the whole notion of you having this job off the table. And my intent was to have her take some pressure off of herself. And it was completely disrespectful. It was thoughtless. It was self-centered, and it was not truthful. It was an opinion that I offered to you, and the timing was awful. And she said so. She said, you know what, I can't deal with this right now. And if you need to take this off the table, then you do what you have to do, because I have a job to do right now to take care of my mother. And so it took an apology a day later Actually, it was just a few hours later. I apologized. It was insensitive, and we had a conversation about it, a truthful conversation. And she just said, you got activated, you got afraid. And then we talked about how we can transition her into this position. We don't have an immediate need. If we had an immediate need, then we'd have to have another conversation. But this is a win-win relationship. We are committed to a win-win relationship. And I blew it. But it's like most mistakes, we need to grant ourselves and each other a lot of grace. We were all under a lot of stress. I was afraid that she just wouldn't have the time to give to this job, but we're going to negotiate that and work that transition in over the next 2 to 3 months. And we're going to make it work. But what we need to realize in the context of truth, there's 3 elements. There's yourself, there's your other person, and there's the context. And you have to honor all 3 to be truthful. Honor yourself, honor the other, and honor the context, the circumstances where you're dealing with, to have a truthful and honest conversation. So I think some of you have seen this list. How do you know if people around you feel safe? They seek your advice, they ask for your help, they're honest, they bring you the bad news. Don't think that a truthful organization is one that doesn't have bad news. There's always bad news. And if you think there's no bad news in your organization, oh, people haven't brought bad news to me lately, I must be doing a good job. That is in fact a red flag for me, because there's always bad news. But can people talk about it? That's what makes a great organization. That's what makes a great leader in my mind. And they bring you the good news. They celebrate, they challenge you. There's a commitment and engagement, and you're relaxed and at peace with yourself. Probably the best indicator of a safe place around you. Okay. So what I want to do now is that I want to move to make this very concrete and very practical, is that I want to talk about strategies that inspire honesty. And it's actually, you can inspire, and at best, maybe what you can do is at least invite honesty. Because if people have really struggled with a lot of pain in their authority figures in their life, you might do everything in your power as a positional leader to live these strategies, and people still make the choice not to be courageous. And that is a choice that people have. So it's not all on the positional leader. That's why there's this balance between safety and courage. So I'll walk through these 10 strategies, and hopefully it'll be give you something practical to reflect on. So I think you've all, for those of you who've heard me speak before, know that I refer to Covey's model here about deposits and withdrawals. And I think it's a really critical point that the first step here is you got to invest in relationships. You can't just assume that people are going to be open with you, especially if you're in a position of leadership. You have to assume that you're automatically in the pink, like a bank account. You're either in the black or you're in the red. And there's a key economic principle that you can't make withdrawals in an account until you make some deposits. And before you do anything, before you practice any of these strategies, be committed to really caring enough to make some deposits. And, the main deposits, you have to connect before you expect. Before you can expect people to produce results, before you can expect them to be innovative, before you can expect them to be honest, you have to connect. That's the first job, is to, we've been building trust with this candidate over the last 2 to 3 months. We just didn't in isolation have this conversation. This is a relationship that's been going on for some time. And so there's a process here of connecting and making sure that you care enough to invest in that relationship. And people, you can't fake that. People will smell it if it's a technique. You have to genuinely be interested in people. It's about welcoming and appreciating and recognizing, helping people feel like they belong, that they contribute, and that their participation is valued. Now, again, we could spend a whole webinar just on this notion itself, on how you make deposits. But here's a few welcoming questions. First of all, just assess your asking versus telling ratio in the relationships in your life. And you can, by the way, you can do this with your team, with your family members, anybody that's in your life that you want to create a safe relationship with. To tell the truth, is assess the asking and tell. I'm glad you're here. What matters to you? How can I support you to succeed here? What is your experience of working here if they've been working for a time? What was your experience of being onboarded here? What was your experience of working in this team? How are you? How was your weekday? How was your day? How safe it is to speak up? And I'm going to tell you, when I feel stressed, when I feel activated, it's really hard to make room for these caring questions. And I think we just have to be honest about that. We're not going to hit the mark perfectly all the time, but I think this is really an assessment to say, hey, how much have we really stopped and connected with people? And I know when I get under stress for results, my tendency is that I'm disconnected with some of these questions. Okay. And what's really important is that you're going to start to get feelings that come out, and maybe there will be one small feeling at a time, one small emotion that people start to raise with you, one small concern as you ask these questions. What's your experience? Well, it's a little difficult. Can you explain to me what it's been like for you? Well, it feels like I can't really be myself here. Well, what does that mean? And you're really listening, and you start to get these feelings that come out. And I'm going to tell you, when you move into a position of authority, it's very easy to think you have to fix feelings. And key principle here, you have to separate emotions from fixing. We're all trained to fix things. But when it comes to feelings and people beginning to open themselves up, what's really important is you don't feel like you need to fix that. When a student says to a teacher, I'm bored right now, you don't have to fix that feeling. You don't have to defend yourself. If someone says at work, I'm unhappy at work, your job is not to make them happy. Your job is not to fix that feeling. Your job is to hold the space to help them understand what that feeling is that's going on. Once the feelings get unpacked, then you can move to fixing. Now, 99% of the time is those feelings don't need to be fixed. They just need to be aired, and you just need to build a relationship. You just need to hold a safe place for people to express where they're at. But I have to continually remind myself that when people bring up hard feelings, even though they're directed at me, inadvertently, because maybe your team hasn't had this presentation, so they don't take responsibility and they do unload a little bit of an opinion. What's really important is to recognize that all emotions that come our way, all feedback that comes our way, is mostly about the sender. But don't discard them completely. Don't discard them at all. Find the truth in there that you might find. Okay, so that we could spend a lot of time on that. But we're going to move to number 2, define a why. So I would suggest that your team, just like we started off talking here, why is truth important? I would make it explicit on your team. If you want to build truth on your team, have a discussion. And I'm going to tell you, your team will tell you why. And if that's their starting point for being honest and truthful, start there. Define why is truth. Folks, I would, as a leader, make that explicit. I want truth telling to be an important value on this team. It's critical that people feel safe to tell the truth. I'm going to ask you why. Why do you think that's important? You could share why it's important to you, but I'll promise you, just like we had a list of people listing all of on this call in the chat room, what happens when people don't tell the truth and can't feel free to tell the truth? Build a rationale on your team about why truth-telling is critical. Truth-telling is a tool for developing courage. It's a tool for building trust. It's a tool for commitment. It's a tool for leadership capacity, and it's a tool for a great place to live and work. And I'm going to add, just on the chat room, it's a tool for creating creativity. When people can tell the truth, they relax, because then you're not protecting yourself. Now, nobody wants on their headstone they told the truth. It's a tool. It's a means to a higher end, but it's a critical tool for doing that. Now, that's my rationale. What's important is not what your rationale is. What's important is the rationale of the people that you serve. and you build that rationale together if you're committed to inspire people to be honest. Number 3, you have to be intentional. You have to decide it's important, like any value that you want to build in your culture. You have to decide this is an important value, and you get agreement on your team. Is this an important value? And I realize telling the truth to people in authority is tough work, and I don't expect it overnight. It's a journey that we're going to go on, but we're going to use it together to build a stronger, creative, more trusting, productive, fulfilling, engaged organization here. And you decide together that it's important. And, I don't know that you need, there's going to be some people on your team that might say, I don't really care. It's always good to hire for the right people here. But even if you get 80% of your team, the majority of your team that's committed to this value, that's good enough, so that you have the bulk of your team is going to really direct and grow the culture here. Define the truth that's needed here. So truth telling is a big statement, and people don't need to tell the truth about what's going on in their personal lives and their relationships. They don't need to tell the truth about everything going on in their life. So where are the parameters around the truth? And I think it's important to define that. And that it's very contextual. It's very contextual that people define what that truth looks like, okay? Connect all these conversations to your values. Your values will be tested here. So ask people, what kind of truth is needed here? What kind of truth do we need? Do we need to give feedback to each other? If you're finding that my leadership is getting in your way, and you might have to plant that seed. Okay, so you define what's required in this particular context. Okay. Number five is attend to your own well-being. So this is critically important. Your own well-being and your own peacefulness is what's needed here. Now, most of you have heard me speak before, know that I probably in every presentation, I talk about the F state and the C state. And here's the thing. This is a sympathetic stress response. It's a biological response when we're under stress. And as a leader, one of the responsibilities that you have, just hang on a second. One of the key positional responsibilities that you have is not to lead when you're in the F state, to have a process that you can step back. And most of us, I'm going to tell you, don't even know that we're in the F state. I was just having a conversation with Marg, with someone where you worked with years ago, and this great big husky fellow had no idea how angry he was coming across. And I can tell you, I lived in the F state growing up. There was a lot of goodness in my family, but there was also trauma. And I lived in this chronic F state, and I didn't know it because it was so much a part of me. I had no idea how I was creating tension around me, and it was inadvertent. It was unintentional. What we do is that we get into a chronic F state, which is the normalization of stress, chronic unease, tense, impatient, critical, controlling, bullying, insensitive, invulnerable, cold, distant. These are, and productive. And I'm going to say productive because a lot of very highly productive CEOs are in a chronic F state. And they use that F state to just drive their productivity forward without realizing they're just burning all these bridges and ruining relationships as they go along. And they're building these great companies. I say great companies, productive companies that might be achieving a lot of money, that might be delivering results to their stakeholders, to their shareholders, but they're doing it at a huge cost. And I can tell you that it took about 3 or 4 years ago when I started to really get some feedback on how my tension was creating a lack of safety around me. And I can still to this day go into that tension, and I've lived with that tension so long, and I've channeled it into productivity, but I'm not even aware of how much that tension is creating a lack of safety, psychological safety and psychological honesty around me. So it's very important. You can't just assume that people feel safe around you. I would take the time, if you're going to be intentional about this, to notice your own inner state, to make sure you get some feedback from people that you will trust, that will be honest with you. A spouse, a significant other, a team, a colleague, a team member that you know will give you will give you the straight goods. And if it takes an anonymous feedback to get some feedback about this, don't assume that just because you feel relaxed, that everybody else feels relaxed around you. Some people feel relaxed being impatient and critical and controlling and insensitive, and they don't even know how tense they are because they're out of touch with themselves. So a big part of my work is connecting ourselves to ourselves. Tell the story. I've learned years ago from the best cultures, never start a meeting without a story. And if you want psychological honesty, if you want honesty to be a part of your team, before you start any meeting, tell a story where someone on that team was honest. It doesn't have to necessarily be with the boss, but shine a light on what honesty actually looks like around here. And it could be just small, little, tiny steps. Celebrate it. Shine a light on it. Ask for truth in small ways. There's always a discrepancy, folks, between what we claim. Hey, I claim that I want truth to be around here, and what reality is. And so we close that gap in small ways. And, you know, maybe if you rate each other on a scale of 1 to 10, well, I'll get to that. Commitment conversations. When you ask for, on a scale of 1 to 10, how safe does it feel to work around me? Now, people, if they don't feel safe, they're not going to be honest with you. But what you do is, regardless of the number that you get, say thank you. I have a lot of work cut out for me and I need your help. And there's what's one thing that I could do to take it up one notch in the next month? And you work with this one small action at a time. And then you show that you're committed to building that one small action, that one notch. And then the next month, you're committed to building one more notch. And you got to keep at it. And you make an agreement with a request for support. I will, if you give me this, if you give me this suggestion, I'll work at this. And this is what I need for support. Let me know how I'm doing. And, it's something that we really want to breed this culture here and live this culture. Okay. Apologize. Admit when you're wrong. And I hope that I have shown that here today, that we're not going to get this stuff perfectly. We have to admit when we're wrong, and then bring lightness, grace, and humanity to it. Try as best you can, at least at the beginning, to make this stuff light. I know it can be very intense. It can be very provocative, and try to bring the lightness into it as best you can. Okay. I always say, if you look up authenticity, if you Google authenticity, you're going to get all kinds of articles that say this is what it takes to be an authentic human being. It's humility, generosity, compassionate, relaxed, vulnerable, disciplined, mission-driven, inspire faith, and you're self-aware. And we'd all like to aspire to be that, but I can tell you there are some days that I'm not any of that stuff. And I think what's important is to recognize when we're not those things and be honest about it, rather than trying to project this need for perfection. Because I can say some days I'm just not any of that. Does that make me inauthentic? And what I've come to realize is I got to grant myself some grace. It doesn't mean I excuse it, and it doesn't mean I'm blind to it. I want to stay intentional. I want to stay conscious, but I'm not going to get it perfectly. And I think we just have to cut each other some slack. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack. There's a crack in everything. And that's how the light gets in, is that I'm more patient with myself. I'm more patient with the people around me. Now, next month, we're going to have a webinar on accountability. This does not lower the standards. It's just, this is the support side of accountability, to recognize that we have to create an environment around us that makes us safe and has expectations. Okay. Now, what I want to do is finish off these last 10, 15 minutes. I want to talk about strategies to bolster your courage. Okay. Create a community and a healing journey. Make your intention explicit. Always accompany truth with personal responsibility. Start small and be smart and serve the greater good. So let's talk about community. I really feel strongly that this is, except that if you want to create safety in your workplace as a positional leader or as a team member in your organization, I would suggest you take a commitment to a healing journey. Because if you're not feeling safe in this organization to be truthful, there's some healing that's necessary somewhere in your life. That you ended up in an organization like this. I'm not saying you caused it, but take personal responsibility to say, there's some healing in me that needs to happen. And I feel very strongly that we all need a community that we can practice being safe with away from our workplace. Now, if you want to build safety in a family, honesty in a family, I believe we need a community away from the family to have batting practice. We're always up to bat in life. And we need a place where it's safe to practice being safe. And so telling the truth requires, as I say, some batting practice. You don't start with your boss when you're learning how to tell the truth. That's a high risk situation. I firmly support and respect that we all need some kind of a community to practice that in. That's why we have these SAGE forums in our own organization where people sign up and we bring people together to practice being taking risks and having courage. I'm a board chair of an organization called Wayfinders, which is a community of people who have first responders, military and first responders who have experienced psychological injury in their work and in their life. And they come with their families. We have a ranch and we have horses. We have a horse program. We have a bee program. And what it is it's a safe community where people come together and they don't talk about their trauma, but they feel a safe place where they can be who they are. And we all need some kind of a community. And by the way, I've learned so much about bees. Bees are incredible animals. They will read you and they'll only sting you actually if they feel like you're afraid of them. So the goal is to get into a relationship with them to feel safe. And then you can be around them all the time. Horses are the same way. They read people very well. And so so that community can be a community in nature. It can be a community face to face, but someplace that we can go and practice taking risks and being courageous. Make your intention explicit. I would suggest when you start to feel a sense of courage, go to your boss and be intentional about saying, I would really like this place to be a safe place. I know that if we can create safety around here to tell the truth, this place is going to be much, much better place. And I want to take responsibility for my side of the street. I'd like to grow here. I'd like to practice being courageous and truthful here. How can I do this in a way that's good for the organization? I need your help with this. Okay. And what might that look like? And start to have an open dialogue with the person who's in a position of authority in your workplace. Now, if that conversation can't happen, if your boss feels too threatened, is feeling too insecure, is feeling not in a place that they can support you with that, then that's a values conversation. And maybe what you decide to say is, you know what, this is a job. I'm going to come and do my time here, and my real fulfillment lies outside of work, and I'm going to be grateful for my job. Or you might decide to say, you know what, I'm going to keep at this for a while, but if I can't eventually find a place that I can create honesty in this organization, it's time to go. If you don't feel respected to build this level of courage in your workplace, then you got a values challenge ahead of you. Always accompany truth with personal responsibility. So whenever you raise truth, hey, I'm having a difficult time here, or I have a suggestion to make, or I need your help. Always bring a sense of, I want to bring personal responsibility into it. So you're not just dumping on people. You're saying, I want to look at my part of the problem. And again, how am I contributing to the problem that I feel needs addressing here? So if there's an issue that needs to be addressed, what's my part of the problem? I want some feedback. What's my side of the street? Doesn't mean you cause it, but we all contribute to whatever we're creating. The ultimate act of accountability is to recognize that we are contributing to the very culture that we are complaining about. And so we're building what we're complaining about. And the ultimate act of accountability is to recognize that and to recognize, you know what, we're all co-creating this, and I want to take a look at my part of it. Okay. Number 4, start very small. Don't start, don't make this big announcement that you're going to give the boss feedback about what a terrible boss they are. Start small and let it grow. Just like you got to start small when you're expecting people to be truthful with you and expecting people to be honest with you. It's not unlike that in reverse. Okay. One small truth with an accompanying small suggestion at a time. Okay. And then finally, folks, be smart. Don't be stupid about this. You don't put your whole job career on the line, to be honest, but what the commitment ultimately here is to serve the greater good. And how can I bring this forward? Not to make anybody wrong, not to make everybody bad. Just know if you have a positional leader or a colleague on your team that's walled up and is not open and is not sending a message that they are open for people to be honest, it only means one thing, and that's been their way to survive. Have some compassion. I'm not saying it justifies disrespectful behavior, but just know we all learn to survive in our own way, and we all cope with those survival mechanisms in our own way. And just know that this is a coping mechanism, and do the best you can not to take it personally. And that's why we need a community of support, confidants away from our organization that we can get this kind of perspective on. The Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the great leaders in the U.S. Supreme Court system, who passed away here a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, said this: fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. This is our task. This isn't just about planting our flag and being right. It's planting our flag and having others join us in the journey. That is the ultimate vision of creating a workplace where people can be honest. Okay. So again, I refer you to the Academy. I've gone through this material very, very quickly this morning. If you want to dive more deeply into this and be a part of a community that really gets into this in more detail, feel free to research this. It's the difference between horizontal and vertical growth. What we've done today is some horizontal growth. We've learned about leadership, but if you really want to dive deeply into this, that's what's called vertical leadership. And we are a culture that don't mistake. We have a lot of information accessible to us, including these webinars, but don't mistake learning about leadership from real leadership development. So I hope you'll consider joining us in this. There's the Academy. There's the curriculum. The first half, we talk about leadership presence, and then the second half, we talk about leadership practices, where we dive much more deeply into this material. Okay, so I'm gonna turn off the recorder now, but I'd like us to reflect on 3 questions. What spoke to you in our time together today? What was an aha moment for you? If there was any aha moments, what spoke to you? What's one thing that you're taking away with you? And what's one question or inquiry that you might have to bring forward to the group? So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.